r/AskReddit. Redditors who rage quit a job without thinking, what was the last straw? Worked at a Red Lobster for a few years in college. Didn't really have any complaints, it was what it was. Right after graduating I moved to another town and was able to transfer to one near my new location. Worst experience of my life. Horrible management, and the location was in a relatively upscale part of town, so there were much better alternatives for seafood, so the customers were always shitty as well. We were required to be in 15 minutes prior to the start of our shift for a pre-shift meeting and changeover and stuff. Thing is, you couldn't clock in until 5 minutes before your scheduled start time. Like every other shitty company, Darden, the owner of Red Lobster, also a very shitty company, wanted to run skeleton crews to save money, so we were always scrambling. So often I would come in and I would already have seated tables, plural, waiting for me. The host manager's mentality was, well, they need to be here 15 minutes early anyway, so if they can seat them 15 minutes early. Nothing seemed to ever clarify why this was wrong on many levels. Well, one day I came in and already had a seated table. Went over and greeted them immediately. They were upset but understanding, and then went to the bar to ask them to make some drinks. I couldn't enter them in the system since I couldn't clock in yet. While I was waiting for the drinks I was venting to a fellow server about it and mentioned, if they seat me again before I can even clock in, I'm done. Well, before I could even finish the sentence they had seated me again. I told the server I was talking to it was nice to have worked with them, made sure to let both tables know they were seated in a section that didn't even have a server yet because the company didn't want to pay for a full staff, and that they should dine at restaurants that care about them having a good experience, and walked out. No regrets, and I'll never give Darden a dime of my money ever again. This is called wage theft, and guess what? It's illegal. That's cute. Multi-million-dollar corporations. Edit. Okay, apparently not. There may yet still be some justice in the world. Hello, I'm with the State Department of Labor. We've received a complaint from a former employee about non-payment of wages. I need to speak to the general manager or HR director about a potential investigation into the business's payroll records. Always, keep your time receipts if you're working an hourly job. My wife was about to give birth, and I took the job as a temp thing, was only there for 3 weeks, I'd just moved to the city. Worked there while I continued to look for an office job in engineering. The super I called to let know my wife was having contractions and her water broke told me to get to work and that the baby wouldn't be born till later anyways. I said no, I'm driving my wife to the hospital now, and he told me to get the fuck to work. I simply said I quit, and hung up on him. 10 days later I found a job, and have been employed here for 4 years now. I can't see any situation when somebody would react like that unless that person suddenly found themselves in a game show where the objective was to say the most offensive thing possible over the phone. No, you can't help your wife give birth. Just get back to work. My husband's boss tried to get him to work the morning of our wedding. Your wedding is at 4, you can work a half day. On top of the obvious, husband is a mechanic, so he gets sweaty and covered with grime at work. It's not as if the boss was asking him to spend a few hours in an air-conditioned office. That's majorly messed up. Ah yes, my wedding day. I remember I got up and went to work. A lady with short hair was really angry that her rotor replacement cost too much. I remember her words like they were yesterday. Why am I even marrying you if you can't get me a good deal on a new rotor? I worked at a small, family-owned restaurant for over a year. All I did was wash dishes. The owner hated me and always made my shift miserable because her creepy husband loved being around me and talking to me, and she accused me of hooking up with him more than once. My last straw was her calling me a filthy whore in front of not just my co-workers, but also some customers. I was 15. I know you were young, and it was a long time ago, but I've found a really fun phrase is you're displaying an awful lot of insecurity right now, you might want to get that looked at. Edit, thanks for the gold, anonymous stranger. I can't wait to stutter while trying to say this out loud to someone. Yeah, I'll forget half of it in the middle of saying it lol. You're displaying a lot of, security now. Why you're displaying, your securities trading. Bitch. Gotta end it with that solid, bitch. I worked at a movie theater in my hometown all through high school. When I moved for college, I was able to transfer to a theater owned by the same company in my college town. The management at the new theater was absolutely terrible. They were demeaning to the staff, they fired people for not selling rewards cards, and they scheduled mandatory all-hands meeting with less than 1 week's notice. At one such meeting, 7 a.m. on a Sunday, by the way, some of my co-workers were falling asleep. To wake them up, our managers made us stand up, do 5 jumping jacks, and sit back down. They did this every time someone fell asleep during the 3-hour meeting. After around the 4th or 5th time, I decided I'd had enough, and didn't stand for our punishment. My manager singled me out, asking why I refused to participate. I replied, "We're not children, don't treat us like we are." I was 20 at the time. My manager replied by suspending me for a month, right there, in front of everyone. I promptly replied I'll just fucking quit and never went back. No regrets. Edit, obligatory. Wow, this blew up and thanks for the silver, stranger. Edit 2, I'm trying to reply to as many responses as I can. Also, thank you for the platinum. Now that made me feel good. Oh, it felt great. I worked at a gas station deli, and right before I went in for my shift my mom called me to tell me my sister had been rushed to the hospital and that I needed to go there to be with the family. I called my manager and they said to find someone to cover your shift. I called a few people and one person said they would come in and cover my shift. I called manager back and let them know that so and so was covering my shift and they said okay. I came in 2 days later for my next shift and the manager starts flipping out on me how they were fucked because I didn't show up for my shift. I proceeded to remind them that I had to go to the hospital for my sister and that so and so was covering my shift. She then proceeds to tell me how so and so didn't show up, therefore it was my fault and that I cost them money and all this bullshit. I was like, are you fucking kidding me? I'm sorry you were too methed out to remember our call, but I had a family emergency, so fuck you and fuck this place. I walked out the door and proceeded to fuck them one more time. That's one thing that drove me crazy at my first job. You were responsible for making sure the person who was covering your shift showed up. If they no-showed, you both got fired. I don't know how normal that is though. It makes sure that you will make sure that the other person will be in. Sounds like someone a shitty boss would do, so pretty normal by standards observed at most first job places. It became a problem at my first job, so we made a book where the person giving up a shift would sign it over to the shift taker and the shift taker would verify it. If it was in the book, you were off the hook. But if it wasn't in the book and the person who was supposed to cover your shift didn't show up, then it was your fault for not getting it in the book and verified first. No one got fired for it though. Told 3 out of 4 managers, one wasn't there that day, that my grandma had died so I wouldn't make it to work the day after tomorrow. I also left a note for the 4th manager, and asked everyone to let him know. During the funeral I got a call from the 4th manager asking where I was. I called him back and explained and he said okay. Went to work the next day and they handed me a paper saying I'd been written up for doing an improper call out. I handed the paper back and just left. Thank you for my first silver, anonymous stranger. I never thought this story would be the one to do it. YTF did you have 4 managers? I frequently have 2 and that still feels like too many. How much time would you say you spend each week dealing with these TPS reports? I can't tell if you're quoting Office Space, but if you're serious, about 30 minutes. That's the thing about Office Space, when people quote it, you just don't know. It's a documentary. The publisher just accidentally got the genre wrong and went with it. I was working at a restaurant that was, to put it bluntly, fucking atrocious. The place was almost always dead apart from the owner's friends who would make it their life's mission to be incredibly rude to myself and other staff members. Somehow I stuck it out for 6 months. The final straw came at Christmas when I wanted to travel back home to spend time with my family, as my grandmother was sick at the time, and their response was, "You have to decide what's more important, your job or your family." I told them that was the dumbest fucking question I've ever heard and walked out. What do they expect you to choose there? Yes, I'll gladly choose to stay at a place of work that would fire me the moment they could for someone cheaper over the people who have raised and taken care of me my whole life. Many people don't have the luxury of picking family, and these assholes know it. Haha, I had someone use that against me at one point too. Forgot to let work know about a school event when I was in high school. 3 days before came around, and I'm on the schedule. Couldn't get anyone to cover me. Boss, the phone told me, "What's more important, work or school?" I paused, thinking if he was serious or not. School. From talking to him later, it sounded like he realized how dumb that was as soon as he said it. I once had a manager at Panera Bread who would constantly be complaining about how the high school employees' schedules were so tight. I quit the job in my senior year when I was also enrolled in college courses and had basically no free time. She rolled her eyes when I handed in my 2-week notice, and said something like, "I don't understand why you're all like this. When I was in school I worked full-time." To which I responded with a year of built-up passive aggression and the new release of having quit anyway, and now you're a manager at Panera. Quick edit, for those asking for her response, not really anything. She just kind of rolled her eyes again. I don't know if it bothered her later. This is a case where it felt good to say, but reality isn't quite as fun as your imagination. God, this is so fucking choice, have a poor man's gold. Lmayo, that's the most satisfying response you could have given her. I didn't understand this when I worked retail. If I hired someone in school, HS or college, I knew that came first, we'd work together on schedules, but I know the crappy retail job was second fiddle. Managers that don't get this, I don't get. And in turn most would work with me before they signed up for their next semester's schedule. Funny how that works. Was working my second job as a welder, booked 2 weeks holiday paid for a trip to Canada to see the now wife's family. The day before we are set to leave, my manager tells me he's going to have to cancel it as he's booked 3 people off on the same weeks. I explained I'd paid out thousands on a holiday. He then said I booked mine last, so I'd have to lose it. I spoke with everyone on site, yet no one else had holiday booked. I went to HR and he was called in to explain. He came out with the same crap. HR backed him up. I said okay, got up and walked off-site. 45 phone call missed by the time I'd driven home, 1 voicemail demanding I get my ass back in or I'm fired. I called the owner and explained I'd quit and my reason. Turned my phone off and went in holiday. Aftermath. I returned from the holiday to nearly 50 voicemails from manager, telling me I'm in deep shit ECT and should watch my back when in public. Sent them all to a solicitor and police in case anything happened, along with sending former boss everything. He was dismissed and I was offered his job as I'd been there longer than most of the team. Didn't accept as wanted to become self-employed, and it was the push I needed. It's so fucking unreal that adults who act this way get hired to supervisory positions. Those types of people hunger for those types of positions. That's why you'll find them there so often. So this happened 2 weeks ago. I was going out with some friends and I tore my ACL. Told my boss I couldn't come in for a while because of this. I'm a chef, so there's no way I can work with a torn ACL. However, my boss failed to understand that and said that if I didn't come in the next day I would be let go. I quit on the spot. I feel like it's illegal to fire someone for an injury. Yes and no. For the US. If it happened on the job, definitely yes, illegal. If you apply for and are granted FMLA, you can get a certain amount of time off to recover, but that amount is determined by the severity of the injury. If you neglect to apply for FMLA, all bets are off. US laws are fucked, man. Anyway, off to enjoy my Brexit. I used to work as a lifeguard. I had injured my shoulder and was in a sling, and they forced me to come into work and threatened to fire me if I didn't. I had to guard a pool, being unable to swim because my arm was in a sling. Did the pettiest thing possible, sent in my resignation late at night, the day before my morning shift. Have fun finding a replacement, assholes. Why resign and not just let them fire you? You'd have potentially been better off, and possibly eligible for unemployment. I have no experience resigning or being fired, and I'm 28. Some people just don't know this. Well, it can vary by where you are located, as different countries, states, cities, etc. may have different laws on this, but in general in the US, if you are fired without just cause, you are eligible for unemployment. However, if you quit, you are not. There were a couple things building up to the last straw. Mainly, I was the supervisor of my crew, but the boss was getting around to the paperwork that would confirm my title change and pay raise for 3 months. Also, I was supposed to get full medical benefits, but the day I quit, the benefits were in the mail, so just wait for 7 months. The last straw was when the company had approaching deadlines and the scumbag management staff was getting desperate. They kept cutting out everyone's breaks and harassing people out of filing first aid reports. Someone on my crew was starting to get heat rash, working in summer in the middle of a heat wave, but the boss was standing in the shade glaring us down so we wouldn't take breaks. After my co-worker collapsed, I stopped everything and ran to her side to help. The boss came up and said, "Oh shit, heat stroke. Take 5 minutes, get water, get back to work." So I exploded and told them to go fuck themselves, and they're as bad as a manager as they are a person, and they can't treat people like that. I helped my co-worker gather her things and I gathered mine and I drove her to the hospital, and I never went back. I immediately filed a safety breach report with WorkSafe BC telling them of every safety rule they broke. And since then I heard that 2 others quit. The company is under investigation, and another co-worker asked me to support him in filing a discrimination lawsuit against the company. The same shitty boss was very racist towards natives. Heat stroke. Take 5 minutes, get water, get back to work. You can't fucking do that. People can die. WTF. Glad you don't work there anymore, God. I was 18 and working at a movie theater concession stand on an extra busy day. My co-workers made themselves busy doing things that didn't need to be done, like checking toilet paper or organizing candy, instead of helping me with the line that wrapped itself around the stand. One lady got extremely nasty with me because I didn't butter the middle of her popcorn. She was literally screaming at me for it. I looked and saw one of my co-workers just watching me and laughing as they pretended to clean the ticket booth window. I logged out of the POS, walked out of the concession stand, slammed the door behind me, told the customer she was being a complete bitch and didn't need more butter, told my co-worker to go F himself, and walked out. I never went back, despite them willing to apparently forgive me, because this wasn't my usual behavior. Working at a theater is only fun if you're an usher, since you can fuck off with the other ushers all night. Concession is a nightmare. I worked at a theater and the manager made all of the girls concessionists and all of the boys ushers. 3 of my guy friends worked there with me, and they went home hours before I did each night, because we had to wait until after the last showing to start cleaning up. I asked the manager if I could be an usher instead, and he said no. What? They just left the theaters filthy after the showings at the end of the night? Also, how many people do you leave on concession after the last film starts? Seriously, 1 window ought to cover it and you can pull someone off box office. It's not like the lobby is going to be unwatched with concession there. I worked as one of those super annoying face-to-face fundraiser people. You know, those who will stand in your way and use every trick in the book to shame you into sending them money every month so they can continue their scam. Well, I did the one-day training, was sent out in the morning and quit after 2 hours. People hate you, for good reason, and treat you accordingly. I found out soon after how the money is really spent for the most part and have been super against this specific type of fundraiser, especially since they ruin the face of actual fundraising. So now I just ignore them as good as possible and warn my friends not to work for them. I talked to a guy, not sure if he was a low-life schemer or a smart fellow, who took a job like that, went out like you did, came to the same realization, and took off with the cash and paperwork after about 2 hours. He got $20 total, figured it was fair enough, and never went back for a paycheck. It's the reverse scenario, but that reminds me of the old saying Reddit loves. If you lend someone $20 and never see them again, it was $20 well spent. I did this, but door to door. I quit when the guy showing me the ropes lied and told an old woman we were volunteers.